This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined in the last podcast of 2024 by my old pals, Evan Grant and David Moore.
Hey, I'm bringing it this morning, baby.
Oh, Kevin, hey.
Listen, no fake enthusiasm, okay?
Can we tell everybody that this is take two, that this is like the first time ever we've had to restart the podcast because even for us, it was boring.
Even for us, it was low key.
Yeah, it was. You guys really let me down. I'm really feeling bad about that.
Well, you're used to that at this stage of your career. And
this is true.
I'm sorry. I'm in that
letdown
between coming down from the winter meetings, gearing up for the college football playoffs this weekend, and navigating the Christmas Hanukkah confluence on December 25th.
And Kwanzaa and Hanukkah on the 26th, right? With Christmas.
Well, Hanukkah starts on the 25th. The first night of Hanukkah is Christmas night.
Yeah.
Because as Jews, we have to do everything different. We have to start our holidays at night.
But the first full day of Hanukkah is the 26th.
Correct.
Yeah. And we've cleared up all the holiday schedule now.
Not all of them.
No, well, okay, some of them. Evan and I will be going to the college football playoff opening round in Austin on Saturday. We're going down in the SportsDay bus, going down Saturday morning, coming back Saturday night. Let me just tell you something.
Bus? Is it a bus or is it kind of like
it's a truck.
Yaris or something?
It's a 2015 F-150.
What about that RV we were going to have that one time? Are we getting that now?
No, we're not getting the RV. That's dead.
Oh, that RV across America? Yeah.
That was a very sour memory in SportsDay history. I don't like bringing it up.
Well, most of the memories involving me and boondoggles are sour.
I'll tell you something, though. The last time the SportsDay bus went to a college game, which was to College Station for the A&M Texas game, and it was me, Brad Townsend, and Sean McFarland. And let me just tell you something, Evan. I won't have what Brad said to me at one point in the drive, which apparently he was bored stiff. He turned to me and said, "Hey, I've been looking at the college picks against the line. You're terrible." Well, yeah, I am, but and thanks for bringing it up. So anyway, no kind of commentary like that because I will put you off on the side of the road if that gets.
Didn't Brad also tell you that he was really tired and wanted to go to sleep in the truck on the way back and was afraid to go to sleep because everybody would make fun of him?
That is correct.
Well, let me just tell you this: I will go to sleep in the truck on the way back. I will curl up.
That was a little later too. We got in to my place at 3:30 a.m. And Brad had to go on to Flower Mound from there. And that's another hour and a half or whatever it is.
It's not that far.
Oh, yeah, it's at least that far.
Come on.
It just feels like it.
The question is native Texans.
Native Texans? What?
You are native Texans, and I am a naturalized one.
Yeah.
It seems to me like Texans love to drive. They love to drive late into the night. They love to drive everywhere.
Sometimes I just get up in the middle of the night.
We have no choice.
That's true. We don't have mass transit.
Because of lack of mass transit and no choice and large open spaces.
No trains, no subways, no nothing.
You guys just love driving all over the place.
You bet. You bet we do.
At Texas Capital, we know that the path to greatness isn't for the faint of heart. It's full of chances and opportunities with no promises. We know because we help clients and communities achieve greatness every day. Texas Capital is a full-service financial services firm founded and headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Our customized solutions were built to keep your business moving forward. Please visit texascapital.com to learn more. That's texascapital.com. Texas Capital is the collective brand name for the Texas Capital Bank and its separate non-affiliate banks and wholly owned subsidiaries. For deposit products, member FDIC.
Well, I'm driving this bus right now, so let's get going here. Let's talk about what's happening here with the Cowboys.
Let's drive it over.
I've got something much more interesting, the Cowboys.
Yeah, well, they were interesting on Sunday. I got to tell you, the belated playoff push.
Playoff probability of 1% and holding.
David, did you have the Cowboys winning that game?
Yes, sir.
You did not.
I have my Yes, I did. I had my finger on the pulse of this team. I think I told
That's
everyone
good
it was
to
going to
know.
be under 500 going into the final 3 games of the season.
That's good to know that has paid off. You being out there every day, that has paid off with you actually picking them to win when they did win. That's very
to
good.
beat Carolina. I just felt a Panthers team that was favored for the first time in 33 games. That's a little
Couldn't
too
live up
heady
to that.
atmosphere for them. I just don't think they were prepared to handle those sort of expectations, and they were not.
No,
much
they were
pressure.
not. That was a miserable performance by the Panthers. I don't know. It's kind of hard to judge how good it is by the Cowboys. In one sense, it's a little bit like typical Cowboys, isn't it? They just beat up on bad teams. In these last 3 12-5 seasons, if you're no good, we'll roll you
Yeah.
up. The problem, of course, has always been the teams that are pretty good, which is a problem once you get to the playoffs, because there are no more of those bad teams that you can just roll up like
That is
Yeah.
quite the analysis right there.
Isn't
That's
it?
what you get
And
on
this
this podcast.
that's
You
the
can't
kinda
get that
heady
other
stuff.
podcasts.
You get here. Other places they're talking about analytics and insight and stuff like that. No, sir.
Us, please, come on.
No.
There are people who have listened all year waiting for that kind of analysis in the last show.
That's true.
He honed it down to that point, saved it
Yeah.
for the final show. It was all leading to
Exactly.
this moment.
That's exactly right. All right. So here's the deal. Troy Aikman, as we brought up last week, had made the point.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Troy Aikman, that guy that used to win Super Bowls for the Cowboys, he brought up the point that really the Cowboys are not all that far away from being a good team. And that he was making the point that unless you're going to hire Bill Belichick, who is now the coach at North Carolina, which is still the craziest story ever, is that how much better are you going to do than Mike McCarthy? I guess the question I should ask straight up then, David, these wins that are starting to mount a little bit, 3 of the last 4 games they've won, is this going to change Mike McCarthy's job status?
I personally don't think so, and I don't think how they finish out this season really impacts it. Just from the standpoint, I mean, with one proviso, if you get blown out in these final 3 games, I think that makes it pretty. But we haven't seen any indication from them that that's going to happen based on how they played in the stretch. And I just look. Jerry Jones set this in motion when he decided to go into this season with Mike McCarthy and his entire staff on the final year of their deals. And despite the injuries, despite how circumstances may have conspired to work against them, a lot of that was what the Jones family chose not to accomplish in the offseason as far as supplementing this roster or doing so in a timely manner. It's not just the fact they didn't supplement the roster with outside talent and let too many internal players walk. It's in that they took so much time in addressing some of their needs and their more obvious needs that I think it put them in a bind as well. Despite all of that swirling around, I think Jones set all this in motion where it'd be very difficult for McCarthy and the staff to return. And I'm starting to hear now people on the outside going, well, it's Jerry and now Belichick's out of it. And let me say this. Does anyone believe that there weren't back channel communications between Bill Belichick and the Jones family about whether or not this would work going forward? And on some level, both sides determined it would not work. And so that's why Belichick is in college ball for the first time in his career.
I think you're absolutely right. Because I think that when he talked about, complained about how crazy was the ownership in the NFL and all that kind of stuff. Well, who else would he be talking about other than Robert Kraft? I mean, I think that Jerry kind of front and center for that.
Well, and Belichick leaves nothing to chance. I mean, he was looking at being frozen out of another head coaching job for a second consecutive cycle. He had certain teams he wanted to go to. He checked with those teams to see if it could happen and then made his determination about whether or not to wait for those and because he would get it, or he didn't like the look of being out for a second consecutive year and he didn't want to be, which people in power don't do, right? I think he expected teams to come to him on his terms. They didn't. North Carolina was happy to come to him on his terms. So a lot of that is ego and status and what you believe your status in an industry is. And I think that's why you saw that move. But look, remember, Dave Campo was coaching this team in the early 2000s, and Jerry Jones was on the runway in New Jersey interviewing Bill Parcells while the Cowboys were playing games, and Campo was getting them ready to play. So I find it very hard to believe that that there wasn't some back channel communication between Belichick and the Cowboys to get a feel for whether or not it would work. It did not. So, but now people are going, well, what if, who better out there than Mike McCarthy? So maybe you do that. To me, that's not a good enough excuse either. It's not like, well, who else you going to go with? There's always somebody else to go with. And people are just, look, we've been on hold waiting for what I feel is going to be the inevitable for months now because of the way this season has unfolded. I don't know that anything particularly has changed. And you step back and you look at the 5 years, 3 straight 12-5 seasons, which this team hadn't done since the 90s, but only one playoff win to show for it in 5 seasons here. And what was the charge that Mike McCarthy was brought in to do was to take this team deeper in the playoffs than it had gone in previous years.
So let me ask you this, David. I do want to get eventually to what this team could do next year, no matter who's coaching it. But we can't bring that all up without saying what we think Jerry might do in a coaching change. Do you think that he is more likely to go with an experienced head coach, or would he take a chance and roll the dice on an offensive coordinator, like a Ben Johnson from Detroit, somebody like that?
I believe the older Jerry gets, the less likely he is to jump out there like he did with Jimmy Johnson and said at that point it was like, college coaches can't make this transition. What are you doing? You don't know what's going on, I think the longer you're in an industry, the less willing you are to take chances, and you also start to look at your mortality. And I think Jerry believes that a first-time coach, no matter what kind of upside he may have, there is a learning curve there. And at 82, and he'll be 83 next year, do you really want a 2 to 3 year learning curve before you start to see the benefits of that? And I think part of it is he stuck so long with Jason Garrett. That was his choice to be his Tom Landry. He stuck with him for 9.5 seasons, and they never had back-to-back winning seasons in that span. So I think that's a big reason he turned to Mike McCarthy. Now the issue is, really you look out there, and this is why why not McCarthy is coming up. There's really no one out there with credentials more accomplished than Mike McCarthy that can come in and take over this team. I mean, I guess you could argue Pete Carroll would be equal. He's also won a Super Bowl, but he's in his 70s. I just think at this stage, I think Jerry feels this team is right on the cusp with one or two more off seasons to really get their financial house in order along with their personnel. And this is the time to strike now. I mean, you also just signed Dak to the most lucrative contract in NFL history. You better tie it into these next 2 to 3 years. So I think taking a chance on a first-time coach, I don't think Jerry Jones would be inclined to do that.
I hadn't even thought about Pete Carroll. I just considered him retired, and I'm guessing if he wanted to come back, I'd think about it. How could you not think about
high energy guys, won a Super Bowl? Now, again, it's who he has in as a staff, right? Again, this is any of these guys. It's like who who's the offensive coordinator, who's the defensive coordinator, who's special teams, how are you going to structure this thing? So I guess I would not rule out Mike McCarthy returning, but it has to be a mutual thing too, right?
Yeah.
And
sure.
I think Mike McCarthy would have some other opportunities this offseason as well, since his contract expires. And I think being allowed to go into the final year of his deal, why wouldn't he explore that if those opportunities are there? So we'll see how this all plays out. But the moment you went into the season with him on the final year of his deal, this wasn't like the first time you went into the final year of the deal with Jason Garrett, who had never been a head coach anywhere in the league and did not have postseason success. This is a guy who's won the Super Bowl, who's one of the winningest active coaches in NFL history. This is a guy that we're speaking of Bill Belichick. Belichick raves about Mike McCarthy and what a good coach he is. More so than you hear him talk about some other coaches in the NFL. So there are a lot of attributes that line up for Mike McCarthy. It's just that the postseason has not been one of them.
No, that's kind of a stickler. That's a problem when you haven't done that.
And that's big too. Do you dismiss 3 straight 12-5 years, and building a culture that even when your key players are out, this team has won 3 or 4, when a lot of other teams would have said, well, what do we have to play for now? Let's just ride this thing out and get to next season, and we'll go from there.
It's interesting when you talk about how the team has done under Cooper Rush as the quarterback. I give him credit. You watch him play, and it's like, well, man, this guy is not an NFL quarterback. But all he does is win. And one of the things that has come up in his time and it can't be a coincidence, is the fact that they're running the ball so much better now. Rico Dowdle has all of a sudden become, a legitimate NFL running back and threat in the time when Zach Martin is out and when Tyler Guyton has fallen out of the rotation at left tackle. So how do we explain that, David? Isn't that somewhat of an indictment of Dak Prescott?
Well, we talked about that some. When you have more talent, sometimes you look at a defensive set and go, okay, well, I'm going to call out of this run play because I can make more happen here in the passing game, the way this game's been going. I think Rush does that less. I think he sticks to the game plan more. I think the game plan is different with Cooper Rush because he can't do as many things. But, I think all successful backups, by and large, who aren't supremely talented players waiting their chance to break out. I'm not talking about the Jordan Loves of the world who are just learning the game, so when it gets their chance, they know it's going to be their team. Cooper Rush is a career backup. He knows it. And I think one of the greatest strengths you can have as a backup quarterback is knowing your limitations and knowing what you can and can't do. And he plays to them. And he's not as tempted to take a chance on a certain play when he sees a defense because he doesn't necessarily have the talent or the pedigree or the latitude to do it that a franchise quarterback would, if you will. I also think the thing, and McCarthy used this phrase after the Charlotte game, which I thought was pretty good. He talks about how Cooper Rush is situationally disciplined. And that's the thing with Cooper Rush. He doesn't put up great numbers. In fact, this past game, when they got to 30 points, that's the largest point output that the offense has generated with Cooper Rush as a starter. I know they got the 36 earlier this year against Washington in the win, but those were 2 return touchdowns on special teams. You got to 27 against New York, but that came with that overshown tip and interception return for a touchdown. So he's a guy who really kind of gets you into that 20 to 25 range usually, and not much more. But what happens is he, at moments of the game where they need to do something to change momentum or to stop the other team's momentum, he tends to respond. And that's why, in my mind, he's 8-4 as a starter in place of Dak Prescott through the years.
Yeah, that's a crazy stat when you hear that. And I know some of it's the quality of the teams that he's playing, but still.
Yeah, before the quality of the teams is good. Look how this team was struggling. I mean, he has a better record this year in the games he's played than Dak did.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's all very crazy to me that it could turn out that way. I'm wondering if, seeing Dak sitting in the up in the press box, coaching booth, I wonder if this is a good thing for him. Getting this perspective, sitting up there, watching what's going on, maybe, seeing some things that he doesn't normally see, and maybe gets a better idea of exactly what it is the coaches are talking about through the headsets.
Yeah, but I will say, in fairness, early too, I think they let so much talent walk offensively early this year, and then you had 2 rookies in the offensive line that you were getting acquainted earlier, who are better suited to be productive now than they were earlier in the season. You had not settled in on Rico Dowdle as your main back. You were still rotating there, and no one was effective. Brandon Cooks, your second best receiver, went down early in week 4 and hadn't played. And your younger receivers have not stepped up to seize that number 2 role behind Brandon Cooks while he was out. And CeeDee Lamb, you let him skip the entire offseason program in training camp to get a contract done. And he came in here and he acknowledged 4 to 5 weeks in the season that he was just starting to get his legs and his rhythm in place from such a long layoff. So, like I said, this is the Cowboys front office did Mike McCarthy no favors going into this season by delaying the signings of key players. And look, they knew they needed to do something in the defensive line and other places, and they waited and addressed it in training camp, a lot of it. And so those players weren't there for the offseason program, so they have a transition period to get ready. So this team wasn't ready to get up and running out of the gates this year, and a lot of that is on the Jones family. That being said, there are no consequences for the Jones family at the end of the season, only for Mike McCarthy and his staff.
Or that's for a later date, the consequences for the Jones family. So let me ask you this: with Rico Dowdle playing so well and they're getting so much out of the running game, I'm not saying they shouldn't draft a running back, but does this start to take Ashton Jeanty out of the equation? And if you feel like that, what more could you ask of Dowdle than 100-yard games? If he's going to do that for you, maybe you spend that pick now on something else that's going to help a place where you're not getting NFL caliber play.
That will certainly be a strong discussion point. But if Jeanty is there where they pick, which I think will still be unlikely at this point, I think you'll go probably before they are, which is around that 12 to 15 range is what you're looking at with Dallas at the moment. I would counter that argument by saying, Detroit's offense was pretty explosive with Montgomery and Gibbs. Now, I know they just lost Montgomery for the season, but you can make it work with 2 backs. It's just about getting them in space. And, backs by and large don't hold up to a pounding in this league before you start to see a deterioration. Derrick Henry in Baltimore is proven to be an exception. Ezekiel Elliott has not been an exception, and you've seen that more and more. So I think it will still be on the table. But again, all of this is prefaced with who's the coaching staff going to be and what is their bent. 2, I think now with these injuries that have come up this season, Trayvon Diggs now is going to have, knee surgery again on the left knee. There's a chance he may not be ready for the start of next season. DeMarvion Overshone won't play next year in 2025 because of his latest injury. Now, suddenly you thought you were in pretty good shape at linebacker. Now you have to look at supplementing linebacker in the upcoming draft. You thought you were in pretty good shape at corner. Now you have to look at, maybe we need another young corner in here with Diggs and his situation, being unable to finish 2 consecutive years because of knee surgery on the same knee. So I think there's so many needs across the board now that it's not as simple as saying, well, yeah, you just take the running back there and that would have the best immediate impact.
Yeah, I would say right now that that's supposed to be the deepest position in the draft is running back. They need to take one. There's no question about that. But you could probably take one in the second, maybe even the third round, and still get somebody who's going to be very productive for you.
Well, they could have taken one in the third round this year, and they chose to go offensive line and linebacker.
Right.
They made that conscious decision, and they had to live with it early in the year before they were able to establish Dowdle.
Well, now it's starting to pay off a little bit because Leofau's actually making an impact. He's the linebacker they took with the second pick of the third round. So, I would expect that'll be issues. But I do think, it is problematic, these guys that have had injuries, particularly Diggs and Overshown. Those are big losses if they aren't ready to go. I mean, obviously Overshown won't play at all. Diggs may be compromised somewhat.
And what level will they be when they return?
Right.
Both are undergoing their second knee surgeries early in their careers,
Yeah, it's not a good thing. Sometimes we have a tendency now because they do such a good job on a lot of these things that guys just going to return. But we see that Terrence Steele has not been the same player that he was before his knee injury. And, and I still want to explore that thing of maybe they move him inside the guard, which, is more of a running type position, run blocking type position than it is at tackle. And tackle, you got to be out in space. You get more help inside at guard. He is a very effective run blocker. He's just not a good pass blocker anymore. So, I'm
and then people talk about that. Services. Yeah, I think it's all on the board. And then you go like, well, but move Tyler Guyton over to the right side, which is where he was in college. All that is fine. Now, who's your left tackle next year?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you swing Tyler Smith back out there? Do you go? Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. And we haven't even talked about their need for a receiver after CeeDee Lamb. I doubt Brandon Cooks is going to be back. None of these guys who have been on the roster this year have been able to establish themselves despite all the opportunities they got. I know Tolbert and Jalen Brooks both scored touchdowns in the second half of that Carolina game, which was encouraging, but they've had a lot of opportunities this year and have not been a consistent presence in the passing game. You can make a pretty strong argument they need to take a receiver high too.
David, you are discounting Jonathan Mingo, the great Jonathan Mingo.
Who I believe was shut out in his return to Carolina.
Yeah, how about that? If that can't motivate you, going back there and doing something, and of course they spent a fourth-round pick on him.
Fourth rounder.
Yeah, I mean, just unbelievable some of the decisions that get made around there. All right, that's going to do it for our Cowboys segment of the podcast. We're going to move over now and talk a little bit about the college playoffs. College football playoffs are with us. We have the very first edition of the expanded playoffs, 12 teams. They will start, of course, with the games on campus, which is really a unique kind of thing in these playoffs. And personally, I wish what the committee had done, because I know one of the considerations when they were discussing the idea of expanding it to 12 games is that, okay, you're going to make some teams play 4 more weeks, right? Or 4 more games. Is that a good thing for the fan base when they're going around to all these different places and trying to travel and do this? Is that really something we want to do? Well, in these first round games, they had the opportunity to make it a little more regional. It would have required them fudging a little bit on the standings. I would have had no problem with that because you only would have had to move them one spot, the SMU Mustangs, for them to be playing Saturday in Austin against Texas. And how great would that have been? The first time that the two teams have played since 1995 in the last season of the old Southwest Conference. I would have been all for that happening. Instead, Texas gets Clemson, and SMU goes to Happy Valley, where it won't be so happy.
They get better weather, though, than Texas, right?
Yeah. It's supposedly no snow. It's snowing there now in our forecast, Evan. I believe he's our own Pete Delkus. I believe that you had determined it's not snowing there, or it is snowing there now. It's not supposed to be snowing on Saturday, but there's supposed to be wind gusts of 20 up to 25 miles per hour.
Let me straighten that out for you.
Temperatures in the 20s.
Yesterday.
Snowed yesterday.
It's whiteout conditions at the stadium right now, which is going to be confusing since Penn State always wears all white anyway. it is going to snow Friday night, and then it is not going to get above 30 degrees for the game. Okay?
I would also argue that is more Harold Taft than Pete Delkus, but go ahead.
That is. He is more of a Harold Taft kind of guy. And listen, this to me is the fact that you're playing Penn State is going to be a little problematic. They're pretty good. But it's a much larger issue for SMU to have to go up there and play in that. I don't know how many of the guys on this roster have ever even been in temperatures like that or in conditions like that in front of 100,000 people, much less, had to play football in it. Kevin Jennings, a really fine quarterback.
What other things would you be in front of 100,000 people in the snow for?
What about it?
What other things would you be in front of 100,000 people in the snow for?
I don't know.
Winter Olympics.
I don't know. You've lost me on the question.
Well,
Mr.
you basically said I don't know how many players on this team have ever.
Well, I was talking about it that they hadn't been in that kind of weather.
Environment.
First of all, and then you're also in front of 100,000 people. That was the point, Evan.
Right.
Yeah. So sit down and be quiet. Here's the thing with Kevin Jennings, a really terrific quarterback, and from Dallas, and how often has he played in those kind of conditions? That's going to be really difficult for them to do that. I mean, once they get over that initial shock, I think of being in the playoffs, playing at Penn State, playing in front of all these kind of fans, they're going to have to deal with that weather as well. So we'll see how they do. I just would have much preferred SMU playing at Texas. That would have been so much fun, I think, to see that. And I would give SMU a real shot at winning that game. I still give them a shot at beating Penn State, just not the same as it would have been at playing Texas. There would have been a lot more of an emotional factor there. The conditions would have been a lot better. And I do think that a quarterback like Kevin Jennings, because of his ability to play on the run, we saw at the end of that Clemson game what a fine plays he was making consistently on the run. Great passes. He's got a really good arm. He presents a real issue at quarterback, and I think we've seen that more and more in football, pro football, college football. The quarterbacks who can make off schedule plays, get outside, make things happen, they present real difficulties for defenses. And Texas has a very good defense, maybe the best defense in the country. But anytime you introduce that into the equation, that's going to make a difference.
Then why didn't they have more defensive players on the All-SEC team?
Well, David, it's funny you should bring that up. Georgia, had 14 players on the All-SEC team. That's all three levels of the SEC team, I should say. I don't want you to think that there's 14 on the first team. But that's a lot. And Texas had 7. And of those 7, most of them were on offense. And that's kind of a crazy thing to think that not more of Texas defensive players were on the team. Steve Sarkisian was upset that Alfred Collins, his fine defensive tackle, and Michael Taft, his safety, weren't on any of the 3 teams. And Anthony Hill Jr., who is really one of the finest linebacker talents in the country, was on the second team. As he pointed out, Jalen Walker of Georgia, who won the Butkus Award and is supposed to be a first-round pick, was also on the second team. And so Sark said, well, maybe the coaches shouldn't be doing this. Maybe we should let you guys do it, which, just them passing off, duties to us.
They should give it to the media because the media is much more trusted.
Yeah, we're much more trusted. Exactly. To do
turn anywhere today, that's the case.
Yeah. Texas had the best defense in the SEC. It's hard for me to understand why they were that outnumbered.
What's their first year? They have to pay their dues.
And maybe that's part of the situation. And I don't know how much you count on coaches not to do silly things like, well, they won, so therefore they just have the most players on the team. That's not always the case, right? Sometimes they're just better teams. And you look at Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin had 8 players on there, and they've got they got some real talent, and they missed the playoffs completely. Lost 3 games. Now they played a tougher schedule than Texas played, and I'll give them that. But
and I think if anything, that's what Texas got penalized for. Yeah, they had the best defensive stats in the SEC, but they had the weaker of the schedules. I'm guessing that's why coaches penalized them.
Probably, and I do think that some of their best players too are younger guys, and maybe they're not looking at those guys the same way as they would. Players are almost out the door, but I do think that that is going to be something now that I'm seeing, and I'm really surprised that some of the national media have really bought into this thing. I was reading Dan Wolken with USA Today, a pretty, a considerable presence in national college football, saying that, this defense is so good that Texas has, and they're just going to waste it because of Quinn Ewers, and they should make the change at quarterback. And as I wrote today, I'm all for Arch Manning getting a few more plays in. I'm also all for him actually getting to do something besides just taking off and running. But to think that you were going to bench the quarterback that got you to the semifinals last year and has won in places like Tuscaloosa and, at the Big House, and he's won a Big 12 championship game, to think that, we're just going to sit this guy now and go with Arch Manning just seems ludicrous to me. I mean, it's like the NFL. How many NFL teams would just say all of a sudden, you know what, this guy got us this far and we've got this record, but we're going to play the backup instead?
Yeah, it is ludicrous, but we're talking about it. I mean, it's stupid. Georgia would love to have Carson back, and Gunnar Stockton outplayed Carson back in the SEC championship game. Georgia would love to have Carson back starting. There's probably a role for Manning in some regard, and Arch Manning is the heir. But you go with what brought you. And Quinn Ewers played a fine first half against Georgia. He played a fine first half against Georgia. It was his receivers who let him down. And quite frankly, I think it was the game planning that let him down, because they simply didn't run the ball when they should have been able to. So to throw something out there, that's Stephen A. kind of stuff. Let's make an argument for argument's sake. Quinn Ewers is the starting quarterback at the University of Texas this year, and for better or worse, they're gonna run with him in the playoffs.
Well, we act now too like a 2-year wait to get a outstanding player on the field is ridiculous. Something must be wrong with him. He needs to get in earlier. No, I mean it runs counter to the time frame that a lot of people want to see more so now than ever. But that doesn't mean it's the most prudent way to go about it. And his first year as his freshman year, I mean, this is not a long wait in the overall scheme of things. But people want everything right now. I mean, they really wanted both of these guys this year, right? I think a lot of fans were, well, that's fine. Let Ewers start the season, but let's turn this thing over to Archie Manning soon. It's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, well, there's certainly that feeling. There's a lot of Texas fans out there that want Arch Manning. I'll just say this. When I wrote a column about Arch Manning at the Mississippi State game, which he played very well, he ran threw for a couple of touchdowns, ran for another one, threw for 325 yards, wrote a column about that. He got over 100,000 views, which is a little bit outside my normal range. I think that just shows
Should we tell people your normal range? Do we want to divulge that?
I'll just say it's less than
proprietary information.
Yeah, it is proprietary for sure. I think the Guild won't allow that. But, that just shows you the interest in him. There's just tremendous interest in Arch Manning. And I will say that, before that game, before he actually started, when he played a little bit, he hadn't looked very good. When he plays in little bits, and maybe I shouldn't have written that column about it, he hasn't always played real well. He has a tendency to want to make something happen too much. And that's been one of Sark's biggest issues with him is that, hey, just check down, throw this down here in the flat, and we'll set up something for later. Don't always think you got to be challenging somebody downfield. He has a tremendous arm. He's big. He's fast. And that's what fans see. They see all that. These are all things that Quinn doesn't have. Not a tremendous arm, a good enough arm, but not a tremendous arm. Certainly doesn't run at all. And he was not really running before he was impacted by the ankle injury. And I don't know still how much the oblique injury has had an effect on him. It's possible that it has. So there are issues there. And Georgia just pinned its ears back and just blitzed him, right? They're just going on. They're not afraid of anything, and and Texas didn't make them pay for that. 13 sacks in 2 games. That's the other issue. It's like, okay, no, he's not really good at avoiding all that kind of stuff, but 13 sacks is kind of a lot. How many times are you going to win a game or games when you're getting that much pressure? So I do think that I see.
Kevin, I mean, I disagree on this notion. Georgia's rush defense has not been outstanding by any stretch this year, and I think Texas outthought themselves a little bit.
Well, I understand what you're saying, Evan, but they average 1.1 yards a carry. When you're averaging 1 yard a carry, and Sark talked about that at the press conference on Monday. He said, yes, I want to run the ball more, but I don't like 2nd and 11. And it's like, yeah, and I don't look. He's not really committed to the run. That's not who he is. He started that game by throwing the ball, but it was hard to argue with it. Quinn threw for 228 yards in the first half.
Correct.
And yet they only had 6 points. How much of that was his fault? I don't think that was all his fault. I mean, we talked about that. Guys were dropping balls. There was a perfectly placed ball. Receiver Isaiah Bond.
The first half was not his fault. I mean, you could blame the first half, the 2 penalties on Bond for why Texas had 6 points instead of 14.
There were certainly a lot of things that worked against him in that game, and it was not his point. So anyway, I do think that first of all, I don't think this is going to be a problem against Clemson. I do think that Texas is a much better team than Clemson, and I think that they will win that game. They're favored. I think last I looked, 11.5-point favorites. I do think it's time to put Arch on the field, though, just to give the next team an idea that, hey, you're going to have to account for this. And I do think that he does give them a running presence at quarterback, which is invaluable. But you just can't send him out there to run every time he goes in. If that's all he's going to do, it's going to be a wildcat. That's not effective. He has to be able to have the option to throw the ball. We don't know if he's had that option or not, a true RPO, if he's just going out there and just taking off, because that's what he's told to do. Although they did snap the ball between his legs once against Georgia, which was really cute, I don't know why in the world they're trying that kind of stuff. All right, that's going to do it for the the college section of the podcast, because we did talk about SMU as well. I guess we should go around asking. I should ask y'all really quickly. So, who y'all taking in these games? Texas and SMU. Let's first of all talk about SMU Penn State. Win or lose for SMU?
Is that me? You said?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Or whoever.
Yeah, whoever. You're whoever, David.
I'm whoever. That's why I wanted to define it.
David,
people say whoever or whatever rather than actually going to.
This is the way a host is supposed to operate. When you ask a question, ask somebody specifically to answer that question.
Oh, thanks for the tutorial, Mr. Podcast.
Hopefully someone on the podcast when you're directing the traffic. But I will say the conditions will factor in. We touched on that briefly going in on that. I still, this doesn't always hold, but a young team that hasn't been somewhere before going there for the first time, I think it's the rare team that breaks through in that situation, especially when they're on the road in this type of environment, this playoff atmosphere for the first time. I just think everything lines up. And I think Penn State's a pretty good team. I don't think they're going to win the overall championship, but I think they're a pretty good team. I think they're in that top grouping. So I would go with Penn State.
Yeah, I would too. 24-20 is what I'm going to say. Evan, what do you say?
I think I really want to believe in SMU, and I really like SMU. I do think that the conditions are going to be a factor in the first half, and we saw what happened in the first half in the ACC championship game. Clemson got up on SMU, and I do think that SMU is going to make adjustments in the second half. But I also, like David, think that Penn State is a better team than Clemson. And I think it's probably going to be more like a full touchdown game. Let's go 31-24.
Yeah. I think if SMU scores that many points, that would really be good. I just think they're going to struggle offensively in those conditions and in that environment. But, maybe I'll be wrong. It'd be really cool. The last, SMU lost a national championship to Penn State back in 1982. And I don't think it's going to be much motivation for these guys. If their parents weren't even born in 1982. So, but it is fun for us to talk about. All right, on the other side now, Texas and Clemson. We'll start with you, Evan. Who do you have in that game?
Texas by a million.
Texas by a million. I like it.
Let's go. I think Texas is motivated. I think that Texas is a significantly better team than Clemson. I think Texas playing at home, the atmosphere is going to be fired up. I'm going to say Texas 35-21.
David?
I do think a well-fought, competitive loss against one of the teams that's in the playoffs, going into the playoffs, works in a team's benefit if it's healthy. Texas is healthy. It's very good. I think that loss helps them refocus. And they know that the next one they're out of it. So yeah, I would say the same. And I would expect them to win, 10, 15 points, something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm going to say 31-20 Texas. I do. I see the same thing. Texas to me always mirrors the Cowboys. Bad teams they beat up. Then that was a factor in the SEC this year. Not everybody did that. Alabama didn't do it. Georgia didn't do it. Ole Miss didn't do it. They beat some good teams, but they didn't beat all the bad teams. Texas beat all the bad teams. So I give them a 31-20 on this.
Who were the bad teams that Georgia didn't beat?
Oh, they didn't beat. Who were their losses against?
Alabama and Ole Miss.
I thought they lost. Why am I thinking? Oh, the Kentucky's what I'm thinking.
Kentucky game is probably what you were.
Yeah, very close.
They won that game. See, they won it.
It's 13-12. It's like a
it's not a real
score.
Win.
That's not a real win. Come on.
They didn't win on style points, Evan. I think you know that.
Ole Miss is it's Lane Kiffin. Come on.
What's your point, Evan?
You got to.
Yeah, what's my point? Get out of here with the facts.
What's the point in any of this?
Let's David go.
Yeah, David's got to go. David, and we should point out, since David got the Cowboys Carolina pick, that we're giving him extra weight for that. I did not pick that. I think I've got the Cowboys right like once this year. I'm not sure. I'm as good against them as I am against the
which is hard to figure, considering you figured them out, that they beat the bad teams and lose to the good ones.
Well, I just now figured that out. It's just like 5 minutes ago.
But Carolina was favored. Carolina was favored.
I'm learning stuff on this podcast. Not from you guys, but I'm learning stuff on this podcast. All right, David's going to have to go now. He's got to go talk to the bosses and explain to them why he should even be working at the Dallas Morning News anymore. So this might be the last.
I have to make that argument weekly.
Yeah, not only the last podcast of the year, but maybe David's last podcast ever.
Hey, I enjoyed it, guys.
All right, David.
It's been a nice career, David.
Happy holidays, all.
Same to you.
At Texas Capital, we know that the path to greatness isn't for the faint of heart. It's full of chances and opportunities with no promises. We know because we help clients and communities achieve greatness every day. Texas Capital is a full-service financial services firm founded and headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Our customized solutions were built to keep your business moving forward. Please visit texascapital.com to learn more. That's texascapital.com. Texas Capital is the collective brand name for the Texas Capital Bank and its separate non-affiliate banks and wholly owned subsidiaries. For deposit products, member FDIC.
So there goes David, off to the end of his career. And meanwhile, we are back to talk a little bit about the Rangers. Evan, the Rangers made some news, quiet news last week, but they made some news with the acquisition of Jake Berger, who is really he was certainly under profile for me, low profile. But that's to me a brilliant pickup. to get a right-handed power bat that can play either corner infield spot. I mean, why wouldn't more teams have been interested in acquiring him?
I don't have the answer to that, Kevin. I do think that the Rangers were proactive, and I think that they didn't sign Soto. They didn't sign Max Fried. Roki Sasaki is just now starting the process. And so all the high-profile guys, the Rangers haven't been terribly connected to, though they did make a bid on Fried. But I would make an argument that the Rangers had as good a winter meetings as any team. Signing Nathan Eovaldi was their announced top priority going into the offseason, and they accomplished that. Probably paid a few million more than they could have had they made this offer to him in season. But nevertheless, they got it done. That was an important signing. The Berger trade, they traded two middle infielders in Echedri Vargas and Max Acosta, who were blocked in the system, and a pitcher in Brian Mendoza. And in Berger, they get a guy who can play first base, who can play third base, who can DH, who gives them right-handed power, has averaged over 30 home runs a year the last 2 years, and addresses a specific weakness in this lineup, the ability to slug fastballs. I think it gives them a lot of flexibility now on what their next move is. And I'll get to that in 1 second. And then the third move of the winter meetings was signing Jacob Webb to a free agent deal, a $1.1 million deal. And again, for me, it looks like a really good value play. This is a guy who has a really good changeup against left-handed hitters. Left-handed relief was a real issue. Attacking left-handed hitters from the bullpen was a real issue for the Rangers. So they got a guy with an identifiable weapon and a guy with an identifiable strength. They've still got multiple relievers to go get. But the Berger deal now allows them to figure out what they want to do next. They can entertain ideas for potentially trading Nate Lowe, saving that $10 million, putting Berger at first base on a regular basis so he's on the field every day, and then maybe taking that $10 million that they save on Lowe's deal and using that either to go get a more high-leverage relief arm, a more experienced high-leverage relief arm like Kirby Yates, or maybe sign multiple guys like Chris Martin of Arlington and AJ Minter of Tyler. Or they could say, I think that what we've also seen in the last week is by going a little bit higher on Eovaldi, I think that there has been some movement on what Ray Davis is allowing the club to potentially pursue. And so maybe there is a little bit more money and maybe there is a little bit more flexibility in the payroll that will allow them to, if they want to go out and get a left-handed bat, either before or after they trade Lowe, if that's a route that they want to go, that gives them some viability to do that. So I think the Rangers position themselves really, really well during the winter meetings. Certainly the biggest potential acquisition of the entire offseason is still out there with Roki Sasaki. He has started meeting with clubs and has this 45-day window that takes into the third week of January. I think the Rangers have been proactive in trying to get their meetings set up. Wouldn't surprise me if they are one of the first teams to meet with him or have met with him. That's all going to go very much under the radar. But yeah, I really have looked at stuff over the last week, and there's been all this reaction to what the Mets did by signing Soto out from under the Yankees, and the Fried deal as the Yankees kind of bounce back from missing out on Soto, and all the talk about Sasaki. And I think what the Rangers did on a practical application for their needs is as effective as any team.
Well, we've talked about this before that, when you're adding to a team, and obviously in the offseason, it seems like it's moved more towards free agent signings than it has to trades. The trades are not what they used to be in Major League Baseball. And so when you know that you're not going to be making big signings, and that's although that's a fairly big signing, the Nate Eovaldi one, that's significant money. But when you know you're not going to be spending $700 million like the Mets did on Soto, that's just outrageous. There was no need to do a deal like that. You already have a Corey Seager contract that extends into the next century practically. There's no need to do that. But making smart trades to me is always fun. And that's always a great avenue. And now because of the acquisition of Berger, who, by the way, I had encouraged the Rangers to go after Pete Alonso. Their numbers last year were very similar. Berger hit 29 home runs, 760 OPS. Alonso 34 home runs, 788 OPS. He's younger than Alonso, and he's a lot cheaper than Alonso. He's going to make $800,000 next year. So think about that's what I'm talking about. Why weren't more teams interested in this guy? He's playing. It's not like he's just a first baseman. He can play third base.
I think
that's crazy to me.
I think to some extent the Rangers were proactive here. That while teams were, they went into the winter meetings, I think, targeting Berger as a potential option. I think that they had talked with the Marlins. I think Chris Young is very open to making deals. And I think that these other teams that had needs were out there focused on free agents and then reassessing when they didn't get the biggest free agent on the market. I give Chris Young a lot of credit. He came to the winter meetings. He intended to do things and he did things. And sometimes the best thing you can do is simply say yes. You want to make a trade? He made a trade.
Well, absolutely. And as you said before, and we've also talked about this, I cannot stand it when fans are saying, oh, you can't trade this guy. Oh, he's the top 10 prospect. He's this, he's that. 75, 85, 90% of these guys will never play in the big leagues, even your top prospects. And yes, it is painful when some of these guys work out other places. It's painful to see a pitcher traded for a reliever end up being, considered for the Cy Young the next year. So those kind of things are difficult. But I would rather roll with that GM, the guy who's not afraid and who says that, yeah, we're going to have to do that. I don't want a reckless GM, but I would never characterize Chris Young as a reckless GM. I think he's bold. I think he wants to make things happen. I think he wants to win. I don't think he's afraid to pull the trigger, and that's exactly the kind of GM to me that you want to have.
No, I mean, he's decisive. And, I think that the winter meetings have largely become meetings. And I think for Chris Young, it's more about action. And look, last year at the winter meetings, they got the Tyler Mahle deal done and they got the Kirby Yates deal done. We know what they did at the winter meetings before 22. Well, there were no winter meetings in 21, but they took action. The Rangers have done a good job since Chris Young has joined the organization of saying, we're going to go out there and be proactive. And that does not, in my mind, that is not the working manual for the majority of clubs right now.
Yeah, well, I think there's paralysis by analysis. I think what you're seeing now in a lot of the big leagues, and I just don't roll with that. So let me ask you this, because I think it's a very interesting discussion about, so what do the Rangers do with Nate Lowe at this point? Because maybe they want to save the $10 million they're paying him right now and let Berger play first base every day, as you said. I got to tell you, I like the idea, I think, right now, unless something just comes up, if someone's offering you, if you can make a package and is allowing you to get a closer because the Rangers are still short of a closer, I just like the idea of keeping him. I like the idea that everybody talks about, okay, we need to have 9 to 10 starters ready to go, right? No one ever says we need a surplus of, infielders, and the way the Rangers get hurt, and way Josh Young gets hurt at third base, it's nice to think that, all right, if he gets hurt now, instead of running a guy over here who maybe can play the position, this guy who can really play it, he's played it in the big leagues, and he's got some pop. I just think that's pretty valuable. You're lengthening the lineup by doing that. I don't know where Berger's going to hit, right? I would like to see Bruce Bochy talk his second baseman out of always thinking has to hit leadoff, and maybe reconfiguring that a little bit. But
Well, I
that
think
number.
that's definitely in the works. I mean, I think that if Evan Carter is healthy, I think there's a real possibility that Evan Carter will hit leadoff. And listen, to your point, you can make a very strong case that holding on to Nate Lowe gives you real depth on the position player side, and that would be a real asset. And this lineup could use some protection based on how often Josh Young has been injured. All of that makes a ton of sense, and I think Nate Lowe at $10 million is still a good value. I think the question that comes into play here is exactly how much money do you still have to work with? Because if you don't have any more money to work with, you've got to fill 3 holes in your bullpen still. And 2 of them have got to be pretty high leverage positions. So that's the question. Do you need to reallocate that money for bullpen help, or do you have $10 million to go out and potentially get 2 bullpen arms?
Yeah, that's an issue for me too. I think to me this is another deal where you got to make a deal, and that was so the Yankees went out and get Devin Williams for the Brewers, right? And so that's a closer now off the market. I would have liked to have seen, and I don't even have any idea what Devin Williams is making, but I would think that has to be, you're going to have to come up with something like that. Now, look, Kirby Yates did a fine job for the Rangers last year, right? Made the All-Star team. What is the market for Kirby Yates at this point in salary?
Look, he made 4.5 last year. I would suspect that Kirby Yates is going to make double that this year.
Yeah.
And it may be a 2-year deal. He is an older closer, and he does have that history of arm problems. But I would think you've got to look at least spending $9 million a year if you're going to sign Kirby Yates.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with bringing him back. I just think that, you and I talked about this the other day. How many closers have the Rangers had who went, were effective back-to-back years? Just not many.
Look, I mean, if there's an area where you've got to go find value pieces, the bullpen is the place where you can do it. And the bullpen is the place where over the course of the season, it can evolve more. It doesn't have to be completely in place on April 1. So there's going to be more help added to the bullpen. I think the question is going to be how expensive that help is.
Yeah. So what do we think about the West as it evolves right now? So the Rangers, the Astros lost Kyle Tucker. I am flabbergasted that they let Kyle Tucker skate. I think that is just crazy to me, because then there's still a chance they're going to lose Alex Bregman as well.
They are going to lose Alex Bregman. And I think before it's all over with, the fact that they've talked about trading Valdez, maybe they will trade Valdez. I think the Astros are of the understanding that they may need to be in position to start retooling. And so the Tucker deal for me was a real revelation that look, this team may be acknowledging that they need to reposition themselves for their next window of opportunity. Going to be interesting to see what happens with Seattle. I put the Rangers in Seattle in that same tier of secondary favorites for Sasaki. If I was betting right now, I would bet that San Diego is probably the favorite. If I'm taking Joel Wolf's words at face value, that maybe a soft landing space media-wise would be good for his guy, then maybe that takes the Dodgers out of the mix. I don't know that I'd ever count the Dodgers out of the mix there. And I don't know that I'd ever bet on a player wanting a quote-unquote soft media spot. But Seattle's pitching is the best in the league, and the mystery is how have the Mariners not gone to more playoffs over the last 3 years with their pitching. So I think Seattle becomes much more of a factor in the American League West. And if they get Sasaki, it only ups that. Seattle could still turn Luis Castillo into another bat for their offense. The other thing for me on Seattle is I have never been a favorite. I have never been a big fan of the way Jerry Dipoto seems to overhaul his roster every year. I do think that it creates some lack of stability and continuity, and it takes their guys a long time to really get to know who they're playing with each other. And if the Mariners don't move a bunch of guys this offseason, maybe that actually plays into their favor a little bit.
Yeah, maybe so. On the Astros end of it, it's hard to criticize an organization that has been pretty much a dynasty in baseball. So, at some point it always ends. But, part of the reason for them trading Kyle Tucker was not so much, I think, a product of, we need to get out from under these things and retool while we can to avoid just losing him for nothing, as the fact that, Jim Craig just didn't want to give him a 6-year deal, Right.
And they're going to lose Bregman. And yeah, I mean, look, I just think, look, they've been to 8 straight playoffs, 7 had been to 7 consecutive LCSs, had been to 4 World Series, and had won 2. That's a good decade, man. That's a great decade. And there is a cost that goes along with that. And some of that is the erosion of minor league talent to continue sustaining that. Some of that is low draft picks, which has been, the inverse of what they did in the 2010s because of the number of players that they stacked up on. Kyle Tucker not being the least of them, and Alex Bregman not being the least of them. And some of it is a product of, are the Astros, same thing as the Rangers, are the Astros willing to go above the luxury tax? All of those are factors. And if the Astros, as they stand right now, the Astros certainly can contend in the American League West. They've got the pitching and they've still got some bats there, but I do think that maybe this is the start of a move to say this might be more of a transition year.
Yeah, I think so. Probably so. And that's certainly good news for the Rangers and hoping to bounce back from what was a very disappointing season. Some of that out of their control. Some of it just wasn't good. And maybe they do the same thing that Bruce Bochy did with the Giants, make another run here. I don't know. I agree with you that you can't expect to get everything done in the offseason. You have to wait to see what you're going to encounter early in the season, and then you can make decisions at the trade deadline and maybe you're willing to take on some contracts that you wouldn't have taken on for a full season. A lot of things still to do, but it was still a promising winter for the Rangers, as you pointed out. And Chris Young, all kudos to him for pulling off some of those deals, and we'll see what else they can do. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week and for this year. We appreciate you listening all year to this little podcast. It's been a lot of fun to do, and we will bring it back next year. At some point, when Evan is back from vacation, he's going on an around-the-world tour in which he's in search of more places that would, like Rodeo Goat, name a meal after him. But I'm not sure he can actually pull that off.
Can we wind this up? My God, Christian wanted us to be out like 8 minutes ago, and we're still talking.
Well, if you hadn't talked so much, we'd be out. I just sat here. I got up at one point. Did you notice I got up and left?
All my time.
I went and got a sandwich.
My time during the Cowboys session.
I got up at one point, went and got a sandwich. Did you notice that I wasn't here?
No, I wasn't paying attention to you. I was on a roll.
Bought a dog, came back. I don't know. A lot of stuff happened while you were talking. I'm not even sure what you said. I'm sure it was all great though. So thanks. From everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks. Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas. We'll see you next year.